When a senator looks the head of the FBI in the eye and says, "You're out of compliance with the law," that's not a routine oversight hearing. That's a warning that the system meant to protect democracy might already be cracking. Because this wasn't just about paperwork or budgets or some technical form sitting on a desk somewhere in Washington. This was about accountability and whether the most powerful law enforcement agency in America still answers to anyone at all. For decades, we've been told that agencies like the FBI are above politics, neutral, professional, bound by law. But when the person running that agency sits before Congress and admits he's ignoring a legal requirement, the question becomes unavoidable.
Was just raised.
I'll track it down, sir.
Okay. Well, we will be hoping to get a response and insisting on a response. Let me ask you about the spend plan for fiscal year 2025. I mean, this is supposed to be a hearing, I know, on fiscal year 2026 budget. I said we got a little paragraph from the FBI about that. But one of the things this committee and the law requires are spend plans for the current fiscal year. In fact, when we passed the continuing resolution, we required that agencies provide their spend plans for fiscal year 2025 within 45 days of enactment. We're now 54 days after that, and we've gotten nothing from the FBI. This is a typical spend plan. For example, this is for fiscal year 2024, the most recent fiscal year. Director Patel, will you comply with the requirement that the FBI submit a spend plan?
Senator, I will comply with the requirement, and I believe I have to work with OMB on the apportionment of that, so we're working on that.
Can you give us a date? The fiscal year's 25 is, ticking away. Can you give us a date by which we'll get the spend plan that's already overdue?
I'll speak with OMB and get back to you on a date this week.
So the hang-up right now is OMB?
It's an interagency process, sir. I'm working through how to get these spend plans
But
forward.
the ball is in OMB's court right now, not the FBI's court, is what you're telling me.
It's in both of our courts, sir.
Okay. Well, right now, as one of the lead law enforcement officers, you're out of compliance with the requirements of the law. So I hope you will lead by example and get it to us. With respect to the congressional budget justification here, we don't have one. In other words, we have your one paragraph. We usually get, as I mentioned in my opening statement, a full justification, which helps this committee do its work in terms of putting together the budget. Can we, I believe that's within the entire domain of the FBI. Can you commit to getting us the budget justification for the FBI?
I will work with the department to do that.
Okay, so that's a yes?
I will work with the department. I have to report to DOJ on that and work with them to get you that plan.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we are holding this hearing, but we obviously, Mr. Chairman, we really don't have a budget to work with. Let me ask you about your testimony the other day in the House, Mr. Director, where I think you conceded that the budget request, as skinny as it is, was really not adequate to meet the mission. In fact, I think you testified that you would really need another $1 billion. So would you agree that this budget that's been submitted is inadequate to meet the needs, and that your testimony yesterday about it, that another $1 billion are required to meet the mission, is that your view?
Senator, I think my view is that we will make and agree with this budget as it stands and make it work for the operational necessity of the FBI. And as the head of the FBI, I was simply asking for more funds because I can do more with more money.
Well, I understand that OMB has a say in this, obviously, but I think your testimony yesterday was important and revealing that as the director, you believe that another $1 billion over and above the current level is really necessary to complete the mission. And it does put this subcommittee in a difficult position because really we rely on you and others to persuade the OMB and the president to submit a budget that meets the needs and requirements of the FBI. And clearly, at least based on your testimony in the House, you don't think that that's happened. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen.
If the FBI doesn't follow the law, who will? That's exactly what played out when Senator Chris Van Hollen questioned FBI Director Kash Patel. It started calmly, a simple inquiry about the agency's spend plan for fiscal year 2025. But the longer the exchange went on, the more it revealed. What seemed like a dry budget discussion became a slow-motion test of truth. Van Hollen pressed. Patel dodged. And in that back and forth, a pattern became clear, one that speaks volumes about how power protects itself when the spotlight turns on. Because the truth is, oversight hearings aren't just government theater. They're one of the few ways elected officials can force agencies to explain how they use the people's money. Congress doesn't ask for a spend plan because it wants more paper. It asks because that plan is the blueprint for transparency, a roadmap that shows how public dollars are being spent and whether those dollars are actually serving the public. But in this case, there was no plan. 54 days after it was legally required, the FBI still hadn't submitted the report. And when Van Hollen asked Patel why, the answers sounded less like accountability and more like evasion. Patel insisted he'd work with the Office of Management and Budget, and get back to the committee later. When the senator asked for a date, Patel promised to talk to this week. To anyone watching, it was bureaucratic doublespeak. And Van Hollen wasn't having it. He reminded Patel that the law isn't a suggestion, it's a requirement. That the agency he leads is already out of compliance. His tone wasn't political. It was constitutional. Because when the FBI ignores a legal mandate from Congress, it's not just a missed deadline. It's a violation of the checks and balances that keep democracy alive. And that's what makes this exchange so alarming. If a federal agency can simply waive off its obligations, that's not independence, that's impunity. But this isn't an isolated incident. It fits into a larger pattern, one that's been building quietly for years. A pattern where executive appointees treat oversight as optional, transparency as negotiable, and accountability as an inconvenience. Kash Patel's evasive answers echoed that same attitude. Every will work on it. Every, I'll get back to you, was a signal that the system designed to keep power in check is being hollowed out from within. And make no mistake, Patel knows how that game is played. His rise through Washington wasn't built on quiet competence. It was built on loyalty to individuals, not institutions. Throughout his career, he's been described as fiercely devoted to political patrons and skeptical of those who question authority. That loyalty over law mindset is exactly what makes this hearing matter. Because when the head of the FBI speaks as though compliance depends on interagency convenience, rather than the rule of law, the entire premise of accountability starts to crumble. Think about what that means. The FBI controls some of the most sensitive powers in government: surveillance, counterintelligence, investigations that can alter careers or elections. Its reach is immense. And yet, the only real oversight mechanism it faces is congressional review. So when that process is undermined, when budget plans and justifications are withheld or delayed, the public's ability to see where power is being used or abused disappears. That's not an exaggeration. Congress's budget oversight is one of the last direct tools the people have to see what's happening behind the curtain. Without it, we're left with trust. And trust, in Washington, is the first thing power asks for when it wants to hide something. And this isn't just about the FBI. It's about what happens when institutions designed to uphold the law start acting as though they're above it. When deadlines don't matter, when transparency is optional, and when answers are delayed until no one's watching anymore. That's how democratic erosion begins. Not with a bang, not with a coup, but with quiet defiance dressed up as process. That it's easy to miss the danger in moments like this because the language is so dry. Spend plan, fiscal year, budget justification. It all sounds procedural, boring, even. But beneath that bureaucratic calm lies a much bigger truth. Paperwork is power. These documents are the legal evidence that a government is working for its citizens, not against them. Without them, accountability dies by 1,000 delays. Van Hollen understood that. That's why he didn't let Patel's answers slide. He pressed again. Would the FBI submit the full budget justification? Not a paragraph, not a summary, but the full document? Patel hesitated. He said he'd work with the department. He repeated that phrase over and over, as if process could excuse defiance. Van Hollen's frustration was visible. Because it wasn't just about this one document. It was about a culture that's learned to treat the law as negotiable. The senator reminded Patel that he, of all people, should lead by example. That as the nation's top law enforcement officer, his duty is to comply first, coordinate later. Patel didn't disagree, but he didn't commit either. And that silence, that lack of urgency, says more than any admission could. It signals an institution comfortable with opacity, confident that accountability will fade once the cameras are off. But that's where the danger lies. Because when oversight becomes symbolic, power becomes unaccountable. The system only works if everyone plays by the same rules. The moment one agency decides it doesn't have to, the precedent is set for others to follow. Imagine if every department, defense, justice, homeland security, decided their deadlines didn't matter. Imagine if every agency delayed reports until political conditions were favorable. That's how transparency dies. Slowly, quietly, under the weight of excuses. And make no mistake, this is how corruption hides. Not always through bribes or cover-ups, but through the erosion of the systems that reveal the truth. Every time a report goes missing, every time a hearing is stonewalled, every time a director says, "We're still working on it," the public loses one more piece of its right to know. Van Hollen's warning wasn't just to Patel. It was to all of us. Because when he said, "You're out of compliance with the requirements of the law," he was defending something bigger than procedure. He was defending the idea that no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond accountability. And yet, the more Patel spoke, the more he revealed how fragile that idea has become. He acknowledged that he'd asked for more funding, another $1 billion, in fact, to meet the FBI's operational needs. But that request was buried in a budget process he claimed he didn't fully control. Think about the contradiction. An agency saying it needs more money to operate while refusing to explain how it's spending what it already has. That's not just inefficiency. That's a breakdown of trust. Transparency isn't optional in a democracy. It's the mechanism that allows citizens to see where their money goes, how their institutions function, and whether power is being used responsibly. When an agency delays or avoids those disclosures, it's not protecting security. It's protecting itself. And it's not hard to see why that's dangerous. Once the line between lawful oversight and bureaucratic resistance blurs, everything that follows happens in the shadows. Budgets shift without explanation. Priorities change without debate. Accountability disappears. And when no one knows where power flows, it starts to serve itself. That's the real warning buried in this exchange. Van Hollen wasn't trying to score political points. He was trying to draw a line in the sand before that process becomes irreversible. Because once an institution like the FBI decides that compliance is optional, it's no longer enforcing the law. It's redefining it. And here's the thing. That kind of erosion doesn't make headlines. It doesn't spark protests or breaking news alerts. It happens quietly, through procedures delayed, documents withheld, answers avoided. It's the kind of decay that only becomes visible when it's already too late. That's why this moment matters. Because it shows how fragile accountability really is and how easy it is to lose. When officials stop answering to Congress, they stop answering to the people. And when they stop answering to the people, democracy stops being government by consent and becomes government by control. That it's easy to tune out these hearings. The language is technical, the tone is formal, and the stakes don't feel immediate. But this is how you measure the health of a democracy, not by the slogans politicians shout, but by whether public servants obey the rules that bind them. Van Hollen's exchange with Patel might seem small in the grand scheme of national politics, but it revealed something monumental: the slow drift from accountability to arrogance. And the longer that drift goes unchallenged, the harder it becomes to reverse. Because the truth is, democracy doesn't collapse in one day. It fades in silence. When laws are ignored, when oversight is delayed, when the people stop paying attention. And that's where you come in. Because awareness is power. The moment you understand how these small evasions add up, you see the bigger picture. You realize that every delayed report, every unanswered question, every "we'll get back to you" chips away at your right to know. When you see a senator pushing for answers, don't scroll past it. When you hear about missing spend plans, don't dismiss it as bureaucracy. Those are the cracks in the system that hold everything together. The people in power count on silence. They count on fatigue. They count on the idea that the public won't care enough to notice. But accountability only dies if we let it. And that's why this story matters far beyond the headlines. It's not about left or right. It's about something far simpler: the rule of law. The principle that no one, no matter how powerful, gets to decide when the law applies to them. Because when the FBI, the agency that enforces federal law, fails to follow it, that's not irony. That's danger. So if you believe in transparency, if you believe in accountability, and if you believe that public institutions should answer to the people, then don't let this moment disappear. Share this story. Talk about it. Question it. Keep it alive. Because that's how real oversight begins. Not in committee rooms, but in conversations like this one. If we stop paying attention, we lose the right to ask why. And once that right is gone, so is everything that makes democracy worth defending. So keep watching. Keep questioning. And if you want to help shine more light on stories like this, stories the powerful would rather keep buried, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like button so this video reaches more people who need to hear it. Because accountability isn't a political agenda, it's a public duty. And the moment we stop demanding it, we stop being the people power was meant to serve.